network security, virtual private networks, authentication. When we VPN to a network, in most cases we will be asked, we're talking about remote access, in 99.999% we'll be asked for a username and password. I want to discuss available options, how it works, protocols, home and enterprise solutions for that. I will show you a firewall, a Windows Server, Windows Server solution, everything that you can see in the real world if you, for instance, work from home, or maybe you want to set up something like that in your home or company network. We have two authentication levels. It's the computer level authentication and user authentication level. We want to focus on the user authentication. When we VPN to a network, we'll be asked for a username and password. There are two main solutions that are available for us. The first one that you can see in small companies, it is, let me just change that, it is local database. And second is radius. Local database, it means that you are going to create a local username and password on a VPN device. What does it mean? Let's say this is your router that is providing VPN, PPTP. Okay? This is your corporate network with some service. That's the internet, and you are over here working from home. You are happy. You can work. That's not a happy face. That's a happy face. You can work from home. When you VPN to this network, you will be asked for a username and password. And in this case, your network administrator decided to use a local database. It means that he created a username and password for you on router 1. And of course, he gave it to you. That is a solution that is not flexible and not a very popular solution. Even if you have a small company, a lot of network engineers will go for this protocol. We are going to talk about that in a moment. Why? First of all, it is a problem for you. In most cases, this is a username and password that is not the same as the one that you use to log into Windows Active Directory account. That's how we call it. In most cases, it's not the same. You can say, well, it is more secure. Yeah, fair enough, it can be more secure. However, it means you have to memorize one more username and password. If your Active Directory username and password is strong enough, that's more than enough, and you can make it more secure using, for instance, two-factor authentication. We're going to talk about it in a few moments. It makes more sense. Second of all, it's not easy to manage that. Why? If you put that on a router, yeah, who manages a router? A network engineer. Who manages a Windows server? An infrastructure engineer. Well, sometimes it's the same engineer. If it's not, then, they have to do that, and, you have to set up a username and password here. He has to do that in Active Directory and send that or tell you what to use. What if you forget your username and password? you need a network engineer or someone who is trained how to change that on the router. It's very easy to reset a password in Active Directory on a Windows Server platform. It's very, very easy. A first line help desk guy can do that in 1 minute. It's not that easy to do that on many routers and firewalls. You have to make sure that he cannot access anything else because he is not trained to manage this device. That's why all these points indicate it makes sense to use this protocol. Radius is a networking protocol that it will allow us to provide centralized authentication, authorization, and accounting. It means I can tell you you have to have a valid password, I can specify what you can do, and I can check what you have been doing. That's sometimes we call it AAA. Authentication, authorization, and accounting. And it is a centralized solution. Radius is a protocol that is supported on many platforms. It's an open standard protocol. It means it can be used by all vendors. Cisco, Microsoft, HP, and almost everybody. You will find that everywhere. I want to show you Radius on a Windows Server 2008. I use that in my home network. I'll show you my network. That is an ASA firewall. That's the internet. And this firewall, of course there is a switch, doesn't matter here. There is a Windows Server 2008 box. There is a Windows Server 2008 box, and the way it works is, well, I put a lot of information on the screen. You have that in the background here. ASA is not going to authenticate a user who wants to VPN to the network. It works like that. You VPN to the network. You're trying to connect to the ASA, and ASA says, well, what is your username and password? And you say, well, my username is Mike and password is Cisco, right? And ASA says, well, I don't really know if that's okay. I will ask this guy. I was trained, I was set up to ask somebody else if that's okay. And ASA goes to Windows Server 2008 and asks, okay, Mike is trying to authenticate, is trying to connect to me using Mike as his username and password is Cisco. Is it correct? And Windows Server says, yep, sure, that is what I can see in my Active Directory database. I can see that as an account for Mike. The good thing for Mike is that this is the same username and password that he uses every day when he is in his office to log into Windows. Right? He types Mike and Cisco. That's what he can type when he is at home and he wants to connect to the corporate network. Can you see how easy it is? What will happen if Mike forgets his password? Well, that's what I said. A help desk team can sort it out in 2 minutes. They will connect to Windows Server 2008. They will reset this password and let Mike know what he should use. That's very easy, and he can get a new password in 2 minutes. You don't have to change anything on the ASA because ASA is not really aware of this username and password. It is sending this message on behalf of Mike in a way, yeah? It's forwarding this message, and the language, the protocol behind this is called Radius. That's not the only protocol. There is, for instance, TACAX, that is really popular with Cisco devices because it allows you to be more specific with authorization, what a user can do. For VPNs, the most popular protocol is Radius because, again, it is very, very, very easy to set up in Windows Server 2003, 8 and 12. It's very similar to PPTP. When I discussed PPTP, I said it was very easy to set up. The same applies to a Radius server. You don't have to know anything about servers, and you can set up a Radius server in a few minutes. It's very easy. There are literally 2 or 3 steps to make it happen. And it is very, very easy to understand for your end users. Well, that's a lot on the screen. Before we move, that will be the next video. I want to show you the Radius server on my Windows Server 2008. The first thing, you set it up. Windows 2008 and 12, they have a special role that is called Network Policy Server. If you don't have that, you have to add a role like that in your Microsoft server. If it is there, then you go to Radius Clients and you have to add a new client. You right click, you add a new client, you specify a name, an IP address and a shared secret. You want to make sure that both devices have the same shared secret, a password. I have 1, 2, 3, as you can see, 4 devices. That's the ASA that I'm going to show you in a moment. The IP address is 10.10.10.1. Friendly name is ASA. We are going to use Radius Standard, and it is enabled. Very easy. Then you have to create a policy. This is pretty simple because it is a very, very simple topology. What you want to say, in most cases, you want to specify that a user should be a member of a group. In my case, I specified that if you want to connect to my corporate network, you have to be a member of that group. You don't have to do that, but 99% of companies will do that. Why? For security reasons. Let's say you don't want, well, let's say Mike is not allowed to work from home, right? He is not allowed to connect to your network from home. You don't want to disable his account because he will not be able to log when he gets into his office. You want to make sure he cannot VPN to the network. I don't know what he did, but it doesn't matter. The idea is that he's not allowed to VPN. What you can do, you can remove Mike from, in my case, Windows SBS Virtual Private Network users. You can create a dedicated group in Active Directory on a Windows server that will allow you to specify a group that should be required. That's a very, very popular solution. And the second rule is that is the IP address that has to be matched. You can use a friendly name. That I could use ASA, not an IP address. I remember I had some problems with friendly names. That's why I used an IP address. It doesn't matter. You can do both ways. Of course, it is recommended you use a friendly name because then if you change your IP address, you don't have to change that in your network policy. Very simple to use, and that's literally all you have to do basic steps to make it work. Very easy. As you can see, I have a few network policies in place and connection request policies as well if you need to tweak them. There are some default policies that should work for you. If not, you can customize and create your own policy. On the firewall, I'll show you two solutions. First of all, you can create the local database, a local username and password. On an ASA firewall, you go to users and user accounts. Here I can click add. It will open a new window and will ask, okay, what is the username, what is the password? And one of the things that you can do, you can say, well, that's it. No ASDM, SSH, Telnet or console access. It is enough for a user to be allowed to VPN, but he is not allowed to manage your device. If you want to be more flexible, you can, that's what I did, connect your ASA with using a network protocol like Radius with a Windows Server, in my case 2008. In 2012 it's exactly the same really. I'll show you it is done under AAA, do you remember? AAA, AAA, Authorization, Authentication and Accounting. I have a lot of groups, but that's the one I'm interested in. I created a Radius SBS 2008. I put the IP address 172.16.1.2. When you edit, you will see that there is a field to specify the password. Not sure if you remember when I showed you the NPS network policy server on server 2008, there was a place to put a password. They have to match. On ASA you can test it. Let's see, I want to test if my Radius server is up and running. I can use authentication, specify a username and password, go to the Radius server, in my case Windows Server 2008, and ask, is it going to work if a Wi-Fi user tries to connect tomorrow, the day after? And my server said yes. ASA reported that and said, well, I can see that authentication to the host was okay when you tried to use this username and password. If you make a mistake or you use an account that does not exist, whatever password doesn't matter, it will go to the Radius server and the Radius server will say, well, sorry mate, I cannot recognize a username and password. And it's going to tell you authentication rejected. It means that I was able to connect to the Radius server, but the Radius server didn't like the username and password. You have to be able to recognize this message because sometimes you can see an error message saying timed out. It means that your device, in my case a firewall, was not able to reach the Radius server. If that happens, you have to check your IP address, make sure that the server is up and running, Radius is okay, and so on. You have to check all these things. In this video we talked about authentication. I showed you the local database and a networking protocol that is really popular, remote authentication, dial-in user service or Radius. Thank you very much.